Technology will soon make space travel way easier and way more accessible than it's ever been before. We're not talking about how NASA's astronauts will travel to space. We're talking about how a non-trained space traveler could leave our planet's surface for a voyage into the galaxy. From space elevators that can transport us out of our atmosphere to launch loops that can shoot us off to space stations, let's explore the most amazing megaprojects that will become the future of space travel. Brief history of space travel. Humanity has been achieving great feats in space since the 1950s. In 1957, the USSR launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite to orbit Earth. Soon after, in 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin was the first human in space. Then in 1969, the US sent the first astronauts to the moon on Apollo 11, and Neil Armstrong became the first man to place his feet on its surface. Now we have billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk joining the space race, with goals to open up space travel for untrained, wealthy individuals who desire an out-of-this-world vacation. However, rockets are expensive and incredibly wasteful. They're often unusable by the time they come back down to Earth. That's why people like Musk are trying to build reusable rockets. These billionaires have also set their sights on space hotels, but those don't come cheap either. A 12-day stay in orbit is estimated to cost $9.5 million. So what about the average person? Is space travel this century impossible for the non-wealthy? Not necessarily. New technology is being created that could make delivering cargo and even people to space way cheaper than it's ever been before, like the cost of an airplane ticket. Perhaps the most common method will be a space elevator. The idea of a tower so tall it leaves Earth completely and penetrates a new realm has been around for thousands of years. Over 2,000 years ago, the Tower of Babel imagined a great building that pushed through the sky all the way to heaven. Back in 1895, this concept was given some scientific thought. Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, and later on scientist Jerome Pearson, came up with a theoretically possible design for an elevator that could reach all the way to space. The scientists used Newton's laws and theories to demonstrate that an ultra-long tether, extending tens of thousands of kilometers, could connect Earth and space. It would extend from the surface out past geostationary orbit. Then cargo and passengers could board the elevator and be transported to some sort of space station. The concept is closer to being a reality than you might think. Japanese company Obayashi thinks they could have one constructed by 2050. Their elevator would stretch 96,000 kilometers or almost 60,000 miles. But what would it take to build it? The tether would need to be tapered as it extends into space. An elevator cab would be attached to this tether and move along its length. As for material, we would need some sort of ultra-strong material like graphene. The problem is that we haven't yet developed a technique for making long lengths of graphene. But once we do, the space elevator will be one of the first things we construct with the super material. Orbital Ring. So, if we took the space elevator off our planet, where would we end up? This question brings us to our next space travel megaproject, orbital rings. Simply put, orbital rings are rocketless, Earth-to-orbit transportational systems. It would be a giant ring around our planet, connected to Earth via tethers. These tethers would be connected in places called skyhooks. Space elevators would climb along the tethers to these hooks. Besides transportation hubs, skyhooks could be used to create cities that orbit our planet. We could also attach multiple space stations to the ring that would orbit above it and be connected with smaller elevators. According to scientist Paul Birch, we should build the first orbital ring in a fairly low orbit, around 300 to 600 kilometers from Earth, so less than 380 miles. That way, the tethers could be composed of slightly less advanced material. We might be able to use Kevlar or glass fiber. As for how we could build these structures in space, physicist Gerard K. O'Neill outlined how we might be able to easily launch materials where we need them. He proposed building a mass driver on the moon, which would work as a launch system to shoot lunar materials into space. This driver could also be used to propel asteroids to locations near Earth, where they could be mined for resources. Launch loop. Speaking of launching materials into space, let's have a look at another revolutionary idea, the launch loop. It's a proposed system for for launching objects into orbit using a sheath or tube-like structure attached to the Earth at two ends and suspended about the atmosphere. Inside the sheath would be a moving, cable-like system. The concept was published by Keith Lofstrom and is also called the Lofstrom Loop. Lofstrom describes it as a maglev cable transport system that would be about 2,000 kilometers or 1,240 miles long. It could be maintained at a much lower altitude of just 80 kilometers or 50 miles. Launch loops would shoot things into space using electromagnetic acceleration. Cargo could be launched into Earth's orbit, or potentially even farther. This system could also be designed to launch humans into space at a relatively low 3G acceleration. Of course, launching humans safely off our planet isn't an easy or cheap idea. It's estimated that the first loop could cost $10 billion. However, it would ultimately make sending cargo to space cheaper. In its first year, it could launch 40,000 metric tons, making the cost of launching cargo about $300 per kilogram. Tram. There's a version of a launch loop being designed right now called Tram. While stuck in traffic in 1961, researcher James Powell came up with the idea of using powerful magnets to lift and propel cars. He and his colleague, Gordon Danby, spent the next few years designing a concept for a magnetic levitation system called maglev. This technology is being used to move large trains at speeds of up to 375 miles per hour, but it's also being implemented in Tram's design. Building a maglev train to outer space would require a magnetically levitated spacecraft to be propelled inside a curved tube aimed toward the sky. Lack of air in the tube would eliminate drag, allowing speeds of 8.8 kilometers or 5.5 miles per second to be reached in order for the spacecraft to safely exit the Earth's atmosphere. The Generation 1 Tram is intended to launch cargo and is designed to reach a launch altitude of 12,000 to 20,000 feet. Powell estimates that a spacecraft could be launched every hour. Then there's the Generation 2 Tram, designed to carry hundreds of thousands of people each year. It will feature a tube track between 620 and 930 miles long, in order to allow the spacecraft more time to accelerate and minimize G-forces. It will reach heights of 70,000 feet. The first generation Tram is projected to cost $20 billion, while Generation 2 could cost upwards of $60 billion. Would you give any of these space travel inventions a chance? Which one do you think we'll build first? Drop your answer in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time.